Welcome to Madame Raven's. This way to the library. She's been expecting you.
Last Halloween I was visited by a grown man dressed as Peter Pan. By ConstantReader04. I want to tell you all about something that happened last Halloween. With the holiday once again approaching, I'm literally so scared I don't know what to do. First off, I'm a grown man in my late 20s. I work a decent enough job to be able to afford a small 2-story house. It's just me, no wife, no kids. I don't even have a girlfriend right now. I never liked Halloween. I'm a big scaredy cat, and while most of the kids I knew looked forward to it every year, I dreaded it. I always thought it was a weird thing to celebrate. Come on, kids, it's Devil's Night, and you know what that means. Time to put on costumes and go knock on random people's doors and beg them for sweets. It completely contradicts the don't take candy from strangers rule we have beaten into our heads since kindergarten. Plus, I hate to see all the scary costumes. I was a chicken shit kid, and now I'm a chicken shit man. With that being said, I don't buy candy. I'm not participating in a holiday I don't believe in. Well, that's not entirely true. I bought a big bag of mixed chocolate for myself. And so, on to what happened last Halloween. I got home from work about an hour before the trick-or-treating started. The sun was just starting to set, so I parked in the garage and lowered the door to make it seem like no one was home. I turned off all the lights inside and made sure the porch light was off. After a quick shower, I settled down into my favorite armchair with a bowl of popcorn and a bag of candy. I looked at my windows. Blinds were down and the curtains were drawn. Confident that I wouldn't be bothered, I turned on the TV. Flipping through the usual Halloween trash they play every year, I settled on a documentary about aliens and the Egyptians. I was about 15 minutes into the program when I heard a light knock at my front door. I rolled my eyes and sunk deeper into my chair. A few seconds went by, and I heard it again. Damn kids, I muttered to myself. Lights are off. Take a hint. I shoveled a fistful of popcorn into my mouth and turned up the TV a few notches. Suddenly, someone was pounding on my door, making me jump out of my seat. Bang! 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 My heart skipped a beat. I clutched the bowl of popcorn to my chest as if it were something sacred. That was no kid. What the hell was their problem? I stared at the door, waiting for it to happen again. It didn't, so I slowly crept over to the window and pulled back the curtain. I stuck my fingers in between the blinds and cracked them open for a peek. There was no one there. I looked up the street one way, then down the opposite way. No one at all was out there. No trick-or-treaters, no neighbors sitting outside. My heart rate started to slow down, and I shrugged and went back to my chair. As soon as I sat down, the doorbell rang. Oh, what the hell? I quickly walked back to the window and pulled the blinds open. There was no one outside my door. I was starting to get a little nervous. I was sure it was just some dumbass teenagers out there messing with me because I didn't answer. But still, a fear started to bubble up in my chest. Nothing like this has happened before. I was already a nervous, jumpy guy to begin with. This was not okay. I was going to stand my ground and deal with it, like an adult. I rushed over to the door and put my hand on the handle. My heart was racing. What if it wasn't kids? I paused for only a few seconds before flinging the door open and stepping one foot out of the door. Okay, My voice cracked as I tried to sound intimidating. "This isn't funny. I have to work in the morning. Knock it off, or I'll be calling the police," I yelled out into an empty street. After looking around and seeing no one, I was satisfied they would leave and turned to go back in. Then I heard a strange noise. It was like a squelching, followed by a loud burp. Then a giggle. The giggle sounded weird, like a grown person imitating a child. I jumped back inside and slammed the door, locking it. I leaned against the wall, trying to get my heart rate down. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears like a loud, steady drum. I noticed my hands were shaking slightly. I needed some water. I quickly walked to the kitchen to grab a bottled water out of the fridge. I drank half the bottle in 2 gulps. I had a bottle of whiskey in the freezer and decided now was a good time to drink to calm my nerves. I poured myself 2 fingers worth and took a sip. I already felt better. Still holding the glass, I turned to face my living room when I saw something that made my blood run cold. There was someone looking in my window at me. I had left the blinds up and they were leaning into the window. I couldn't see them clearly, just a dark silhouette against the light from the street lamps outside. I dropped the glass and it shattered. I let out a little yelp. I was frozen to the spot. The figure didn't move. I stared at it, and it stared back at me. After a few seconds, I regained my composure. As scared as I was, I decided this had to stop. Like a bolt of lightning, I bounded to my front door and grabbed the baseball bat I kept there. I raised the bat and flung the door open. There was a man standing on my doorstep. A very large man. I let out a small cry. He was dressed in what seemed to be a green Peter Pan costume, pointed hat included. Only the costume was way too small for him. His arms and legs stuck out at least 6 inches from the costume, and the shirt was raised, exposing his ample stomach. But that's not the weirdest part. It looked like he was wearing a mask. However, the mask looked extremely real. It seemed to be someone else's stretched out face. It had eye holes and was cut around so you could see the man's entire mouth. But the details were extravagant. The sides of the mask were jagged and bloody. The eyebrows were actual hair, not print. And it was held on by 2 pieces of twine, wrapped around his head and tied in the back. It almost looked like it could have been a replica of a child's face, but it was distorted so it was hard to tell. "Whoa, buddy. I almost gave you a concussion," I said breathlessly. The guy didn't say anything, but held up a dirty sack. Aren't you a little old for trick-or-treating?" I eyed him suspiciously. Maybe he had something wrong with him mentally. He still said nothing, but shook the bag a little. "Nah, man, I don't have candy. Sorry. Better luck on your next house." I surveyed him as I took a step back. Some blood dripped from his mask onto the ground. He stayed silent, but his mouth stretched into a grin, and he must have had prosthetic teeth in, because the teeth I saw were very pointed and dingy, almost brown in color, but very sharp. His eyes were a little too large and round, bug-eyed. I didn't even see any eyelids. "Okay, buddy, time to go." I started backing into my house. "And if that's you banging on the doors, don't." I tried to sound confident, but my voice wavered. His grin just stretched wider. I don't know how it's possible, but it seemed to literally stretch from ear to ear, and the mask stretched with it. That's when I noticed his ears were slightly pointed. "Time to move on, or you'll be dealing with the police. Good night," I shouted as I slammed the door in his face. My heart was racing and I was afraid. What a weirdo. I thought about calling the police anyway and asking them to drive along the street just to check things out. But it was Halloween after all. What would I say? He knocked too loudly. I decided to just head upstairs and lie down. Maybe read a little before bed. I changed into pajamas and used the bathroom. As I brushed my teeth, I thought I heard a noise. It sounded like metal scraping against glass. I stopped and listened as hard as I could. I didn't hear it again. My room upstairs has a tiny balcony. It's a small porch, big enough for a table the size of a nightstand and a folding chair. That's where I have my smoke before bed. I was just about to open the door and go out, and I heard the noise. Metal against glass. I stopped with my hand on the doorknob. I almost crapped my pants. It was coming from here, right here, this door. It was dark out and I couldn't see much. I grabbed a flashlight from my nightstand drawer and shone it out the little window on the door. The hair on my neck stood up. He was out there. He was standing with his face almost touching the glass of the window, but that's not possible. No person could have climbed up the side of my house and onto the balcony. He was still grinning, but drooling now. He lifted one finger and tapped the glass slowly with his fingernail. How could I have missed his nails before? They were long and jagged, yellowed and filthy. I tried to swallow, but my throat was like a desert. I tried to take a step backwards, but I couldn't move. I was petrified. I watched as he held up one finger and backed up to the railing, still grinning that malicious grin. He stood up as straight as he could and lifted his dirty sack. He plunged his hand in and pulled out a fist of what looked like ashes. With a grandiose flourish, he tossed the ashes into the air above his head. I'm not sure what I expected to happen next. Maybe I thought he would start levitating. But nothing did. I took a deep breath and found my voice. "Listen, man, you need to leave right now," I squeaked. "I have a gun." I did not have a gun, but he didn't know that. I watched that terrible rictus of his fade slowly into a closed-mouth frown. He reached into his bag again and pulled out something else. It looked like intestines. He studied them for a second before dropping them to the floor. They landed with a squelch. He thrust his hand back into his sack and started digging around. "I'm not joking. Leave now or I'll be forced to defend myself," I yelled. He stopped digging and glanced up at me without moving his head. His eyes narrowed. He held up one finger. What was this guy's deal? He pulled out a few more items that had to obviously be props. First was a severed foot, which he considered for a second before tossing it over his shoulder. I heard it hit the ground with a sickening wet thud. Next was a wig, a mop of long, curly brown hair, complete with the bloody scalp attached. He must have noticed my disgusted expression, because he grinned again before slapping it on top of his own head and doing a little jig. He laughed silently before tossing it over the railing. I noticed the fake blood from the scalp had stained his cap and his own scraggly red hair. He dove back into his sack and rummaged around before finding what he was looking for. I watched, shaking as his expression turned to mock surprise. Tears welled up in my eyes as I watched him pull something from the sack that terrified me to my core. This was not a prop. I could see the light from my flashlight shine and reflect back from it as he brandished the biggest butcher knife I had ever seen. With tears spilling over my cheeks, his smile returned. He had a hint in his big, buggy eyes now that said he was immensely enjoying this. I let the tears roll. I was shaking, and my heart threatened to burst from my chest. But once again I found my voice, if only for a whisper. "What the frick do you want from me?" I croaked. I'd never been so scared in my life. He held up his hand and beckoned for me to join him outside. I shook my head no. His smile faltered a little. He beckoned again. And this time, he turned a little, extending his hand towards the sky. He was mimicking a flying motion. I shook my head aggressively, this time shouting, "No, frick you!" His smile fell right off his face. His shoulders slouched. He raised the butcher knife up to his own neck and mimicked slicing his throat, all the while staring into my soul. His eyes flashed and his mouth turned into a scowl. I heard the door open. It slowly swung inward with a creak. I thought I was having a heart attack right then and there. The last thing I saw before I blacked out was him taking a step forward and into my room. The smile plastered across his face once more. When I woke up to my alarm, I sat straight up in bed. I screamed and looked around my room. No one was there. I slammed my hand down on the clock to stop the alarm from blaring. I was breathing hard and was covered in sweat. I shot a look over my balcony. The door was closed. I jumped out of bed and ran over to inspect it. It was locked. I unlocked it and threw it open. It was a beautiful, crisp morning. The sun was out and my neighbors were out and about. Birds were chirping and everything seemed normal. I stepped out and looked over the railing. There was no sign that anything had hit the pavement below. I shook my head as I lit up smoke and recounted the events from last night. It must have been a dream. I was just so tired I didn't remember lying down. It was all just a crazy nightmare. I chuckled at myself. What a chicken. I got dressed and headed to the garage. I backed my car out, waving to my neighbors. Right before I hit the street, I slammed on my brakes. There was something laying at the end of the driveway. Dread filled my chest as the events from my dream flooded into my head. I got out and walked to the back of the car, bent down and looked under it. It was a dirty sack. My heart started pounding. "What you got there, eh?" my neighbor Ted called pleasantly from his mailbox. "Oh, probably a sack of candy some kid dropped during the night. Shame," I answered as I stood up and walked towards my trash cans. I rounded the corner of my house, away from prying eyes. My hand shook as I opened the sack and peered inside. The only thing there was a piece of old, torn, yellowed paper. I reached in and grabbed it. As I held it up and inspected the message, my heart skipped a beat. It was a single sentence scrawled in red. "See you next Halloween." There was a smiley face where a signature would have been. So quoth this raven. My darlings, I hope you enjoyed this and gets you in the mood for the upcoming holiday. A special thanks to the author for allowing me to read it. And a reminder that this Friday is my shot on Evil Idol. If you'll all come and support me and give me a thumbs up and share it with whoever. Oh, that would be wonderful. Thank you all so much for joining me in my library today. And a special thanks to my Patreon supporters, Ermin, Darren and Jennifer, Laura, and Charlotte Emerson. If you like this, please hit the little button to let me know. If you didn't, hit the little button to let me know. Leave a comment. I'm always glad to talk with you, my darlings. I'm open to suggestions and criticisms, critiques. If you have not subscribed, please do so and ring the little bell so you know when to come up and see me. And I will talk to you next time, my darlings. Farewell.